How you doing? Gonna do a little tour here today. Don't mind me with a backwards hat, just an old narc here. You kids got any doobies? All right, anyways, it's the light, but I'm here to do a tour. Gonna do a tour today of Murray Hill. Now, I did a video already on Kips Bay, just to the south of here. They kind of blend into each other, so watch that one, kind of picking up where that one left off. But, Pat, how are you doing today?
Doing great, thanks, Tom. How are you?
I'm great, thank you so much for asking. Before we start, guys, check out the Patreon. If you've seen these videos before, huge help. That's where I got some extras on there, all that stuff. That's also how we fund these things. And also, like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get that out of the way now. You're gonna like this, you know you are, so do that. Aside from that, guys, we're gonna be talking about Murray Hill today, baby. We're gonna be dodging bros and hanging out here, talking some history. I don't know, Pat, should we go? We're right around 34th Street. This is kind of the beginning-ish of Murray Hill. Should we get started?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, so let's start at the beginning here. Now, clearly, this was all Native American land initially. Remember, the Lenape Native Americans from the Algonquin Nation basically inhabited Manhattan Island. You had the Canarsies out in Brooklyn. They actually used a route here that became the Boston Post Road, which was one of the first roads out of New Amsterdam and New York, which would be on the east side of what is today Murray Hill. Fast forward to it becoming farms. I talked about this in Kips Bay as well, but the big landowner in this area was a man named Robert Murray, who owned this 30-acre farm here in the 1700s called Inklenburg. Cool name, but famously on September 15th, 1776, during the American Revolution, the beginning of the War of Independence, there was the Battle of Kips Bay, where the British came in from what is today Brooklyn and basically started moving up the island of Manhattan to boot the poor little Americans out of New York. So what the interesting story is that Mary Lindley Murray, who was the wife of Robert Murray, actually invited Sir Howe, the general of the British, in for tea. And they say this is what kept the forces at bay long enough for a lot of the Continental Army forces in the south of the island to evacuate. Pretty crazy, huh? That's a cool story. People, So today in the Smithsonian Museum, you can actually go see the ripped packet of celestial seasonings that she used. That's not true, but it is kind of crazy. There's this tea and, Mary Lindley Murray, there's actually the reason I'm standing here in the middle of Park Avenue is because right in the middle there is a plaque. I'm at 37th and Park Avenue. There's a plaque dedicated to the Murray family and Mary Lindley Murray and her deed. In fact, so crazy that they did 2 Broadway shows based on this story. And probably the off Broadway show that no one remembers called Here's Your Tea, You Wanker. Huh? You ever see that play? Anyways, so Robert Murray dies in 1786, and his later descendants take over some of the land, and it's them who actually start selling it off and developing it. We'll talk about this at another stop. But remember, in the early 1800s, shortly after he dies, you had the grid plan of New York implemented. In 1807, they start this kind of commission to basically grid off the whole island, and in 1811 the commissioner's plan is presented, and that is what we know today. All the numbered streets, all that stuff, First Street, all this stuff, all the way up to the 155th, and then First Avenue all the way to 12th Avenue, all that is from the grid plan, the first one that was implemented. This was a huge deal for New York. Remember that. One of the most important dates in New York history. Huh? You got to remember that. 1811. You got to remember 1898, the consolidation, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyways, I'm rambling. Listen to me ramble. Huh? Like a schoolboy up here. All right, we got to keep it moving. Let's go. Okay, so I was telling you how the neighborhood started to be developed and all these things. So the mid-1800s come around and everything was moving north, right? You had Union Square, going to Madison Square, going to north, and this is where people with money started to move in. I'm actually standing right now in the historic district. The historic district of Murray Hill. Pretty cool. You know it's the historic district because of the brown street signs. Huh? So if you're ever in any neighborhood in New York and you see the brown street signs, that's a historic district. That's what it means. That's a pretty cool fact. Now, whenever you're on a date, you can bring that up. Say, hey, look at this. We're walking through the historic district. You know why? Because of the brown street signs. And your date's going to be super interested. I know this because every time I tell that on a date, my date goes, wow, that's so interesting. So you'll thank me later. Anyways, I'm actually standing in front of the James Lanier House. Pretty beautiful house here on 35th Street, part of this historic district. Now keep in mind, this historic district was actually developed within the confines of a restrictive agreement that was created by the descendants of Murray. The restrictive agreement wanted to kind of keep the nature of this kind of more high-end neighborhood. It actually banned big commerce, kept the houses a certain size, made of certain materials, and it's one of the reasons why this area from 35th to 38th is still intact the way it is. You can see a lot of the brownstones here. The brownstones, called brownstone because it's a certain shade of sandstone that was actually mined in Connecticut and New Jersey, made popular in the mid to late 1800s. I could go on, but you get it. And the James Lanier Mansion behind me was actually built in the early 1900s. It is a beautiful Beaux-Arts building, as many buildings in the early 1900s were. It was just recently listed as one of the largest single-family homes without, actually built for a single family, etc., in New York, and it was listed in 2022 for, how much do you think, Pat?
50 million.
You're a psycho. It's actually 24.5 million. Pat is one of the richest men on the planet. He just throws money around like it's 50 million, 24 million, what difference does it make? But no, 24.5 million, kind of wild. You got your 1,000-bottle wine cellar in the basement. If you're interested in buying this building, now's a good time to plug my Patreon. Why don't you check that out before you spend 24 million. You also have here Park Avenue, which used to be 4th Avenue, by the way. It was actually widened in the mid-1800s, making it also nicer with little, malls in the middle with, leaves and plants and flowers and stuff. And also they created a tunnel for the railroad, which used to run on 4th Avenue. So it would go underneath, so then it made it like this boulevard kind of thing as well. You also have Lexington right nearby, right over here actually, and Lexington was created after the actual grid because a man named Samuel Ruggles down in Gramercy Park wanted a big old avenue going down to his new development. Shows you what a little bit of swing in the city can get you. A whole massive street created by the city. And because of the nice neighborhood, you had lots of famous people made their home in this area. We already talked about J.P. Morgan, or maybe we haven't. I don't know where I'm going to put this in the video. But you also have people like Admiral David Farragut, one of the more important admirals in American military history. And you have also Abraham and Mary Todd Lincoln's granddaughter. That's how you know you've made it in history, when your grandkids are mentioned in YouTube videos like this one. Lord knows what's been tough being Abraham Lincoln's granddaughter. He gets old and senile and starts, yapping about immigrants. And you say, Grandpa, you can't talk like that. He'll be like, please, I ended slavery. What do you know, kid? We talk about the Italian architecture, the brownstones, Beaux-Arts, a lot of different styles of architecture just in this little district. Pretty cool. I feel like I should be talking about architecture, I'd be smoking a pipe. Huh? So sophisticated. Not a crack pipe, like one of the wooden pipes. Okay, so I was talking about how this area is developed. Well, you have an area here on 36th Street between Lex and 3rd called Sniff and Court. It's a hidden little mews, which is kind of this area for carriage houses that has been turned into housing. And it's a gated off little area. I would take you inside, but I couldn't get in. I tried to pick the locks, it didn't happen. So this is named Sniff and Court, they believe, because of a man named John Sniffen, who they say designed it. But the New York Times recently did some digging and found that there is no connection with the John Sniffen who was around at that time. So there you go. Maybe the New York Times isn't fake news. I don't know. Inside, you had lots of celebrities who kind of lived here. Cole Porter lived in number 2, which was recently listed at $6.5 million, and he kept his boyfriend in number 4. Kind of interesting. You might actually recognize this area from the cover of Strange Days, which is the album by The Doors. You know The Doors, Pat?
Yeah.
That album's the one with the song that goes, people are strange when you're a stranger, faces look ugly when you're alone. Pretty good. When you're strange, faces come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. When you're strange,
When you're
stranger. Georgia.
Boom, 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 boom.
All right, that's enough. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. Also, like I said, lots of celebrities live there too. You have Lenny Kravitz has lived there, Graham Norton, and Claudia Schiffer. Huh? You guys remember Claudia Schiffer is the woman who dated David Copperfield. Supermodel dated David Copperfield, which is only his second biggest trick in his whole life. His first biggest trick was making people forget that he was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. This is the part of the video where we play 6 degrees of Jeffrey Epstein. That's a celebrity game you can play here in New York. All right, sorry, that was kind of dark, but Sniff and Court, pretty cool. All right, this is what the neighborhood is, pretty little areas. All right, let's keep it moving. All right, so when you have such an affluent neighborhood, it's going to attract different organizations of people who are also affluent. I'm actually standing in front of the Union League here of New York City. This building was actually built in the 1930s. Very beautiful, has some elements that kind of harken back to the 18th century British and early colonial architecture. But the Union League was actually started in 1862 during the Civil War to basically pledge support for the Union, right? Because remember, in the early 1860s, the South had won some victories. It didn't look so good for the Union, so they had to garner support. They had to get people all riled up. So they started this actually in Illinois, then Philadelphia was an early one, and then they opened one here in New York. This is actually one of the later incarnations of the building. A lot of famous things happened here. It was actually the first place to recruit an all-black regiment for the Civil War. It was actually responsible for starting the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The actual organization was started when a bunch of rich dudes came together. Hey, we've collected some cool stuff. Let's make a museum out of it. And that was where it was hatched, the idea as well. Not in this building, in a previous incarnation. Relax before you guys start typing away, you keyboard warriors correcting me. Just enjoy the history, all right? Also was home to lots of famous members, eventually became members of here. People like Teddy Roosevelt, whoa, J.P. Morgan, yeah. Also Chester A. Arthur, hey, who was actually sworn in as president right down the street in Kips Bay. I talked about that in that video. You can watch that. Yeah, pretty cool. The building's still there. It's now an Indian grocery. Isn't that cool? What better way to signify the United States of America? So the Union League was actually started to garner support for the Union during the Civil War, but once the Civil War was over, it actually played a very important role in Reconstruction. They opened all these different Union Leagues down in the South, and they became kind of a flag bearer for the Republican ideals, for the emancipation of slavery, and is where a lot of freed slaves kind of made their political home. It got people registered to vote, it got people more politically active and educated, so it was also a targeted place by people in the South. In fact, there were lots of assassinations of Union League presidents, and it actually promoted and began the recruitment of anti-Republican groups like the Ku Klux Klan. Ah! Ku Klux Klan actually had two different incarnations. There was the one that started in the 1870s to counter things like the Union League, and then the one that came along later after the previous one's job had already been finished and blacks were once again disenfranchised. The new one started in like 1915, and like most movies, the sequel was way worse than the first one. So the only catch to joining back then was really you had to pledge your allegiance to the Union cause and also denounce the South and the rebels and slavery. I mean, I imagine today that, you can still join it. I hope all that stuff goes without saying. And today it's actually a hotel. There's a hotel, so if you're a member, you can actually come and stay here when you're traveling the country. I guess if you bring a guest or something, you just got to make sure they don't want to implement slavery. And they're more than welcome to use the sauna. Anyways, all right, well, that's pretty cool. I think we're going to keep it on moving. Let's go. Well, look at that. How casual. I'm just leaning against a tree. I'm actually standing here next to the Morgan Library. This is one of the more famous residents of Murray Hill. So this was actually finished in 1907. Charles Follen McKim, one of the partners of McKim, Mead & White, actually designed it. It's a beautiful Beaux-Arts library designed for one frickin' guy, John Pierpont Morgan. Yep, you guys may have heard of him. But in this building is located like a huge collection of all of his famous stuff that he spent all his money on. Things like, correspondence by Van Gogh, huh? Original pieces of music by Beethoven, paintings by Renoir. You know all those guys, Pat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyways, they're all in there. Original. This is kind of wild. There's actually three original copies of the Gutenberg Bible. The Gutenberg Bible. So the Gutenberg press, Johannes Gutenberg, the German guy who invented the movable type, they made like 150 Bibles in the first edition, right? I think there's like 48 of them left in the world. 3 of them are in this building. Kind of nuts. You're walking around here, eating your croissant and drinking your coffee. You don't realize all the history that's just sitting right in this building. What's crazy is that if you look at those Bibles, like inside the Bibles, there's actually like original artwork inside each one. So what people would do is they'd buy these Bibles which just had the type because of the movable type, right? But then people would like personalize them, make like roses and color and stuff, which is kind of cool. So each Bible is actually different from the previous one, which is kind of interesting. Which is kind of like, today, I guess, in 2,000 years, people are going to be picking up, early 2000s versions of the Cliff Notes to Great Gatsby and see, logos of Tampa Bay Bucks and Tom Delgado's the coolest. Sick, that kind of stuff. All right, anyways, inside this building also you can, see the beautiful kind of spaces that he kept. In fact, it was in this building actually, in the actual library, that Morgan in 1907, October 1907, after already slowly having retired from the financial biz, was called to kind of help out because the country was sliding into a huge panic, possible depression. And he brings all of his buddies in, his banking buddies, as well as the heads of all these trust companies. And he basically locks the door and says, we're going to figure this out. We're going to get credit moving again, or we're not leaving. And it was that way that he was able to kind of free up the lending markets. And, crisis was averted. Huh? How interesting is that? You could still see the leftover Monster energy drink cans and bottles of Adderall that they used. They're all still in there. That's not true. But interestingly enough, it was that financial panic that led to the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. Kind of interesting. At the end of this, J.P. Morgan, all of his friends kind of left and were able to avoid crisis. And J.P. Morgan laid down and just passed out and took a nice big nap. And then all of his friends drew on his face with marker. Kind of an interesting story though. They have stuff like that. Also right around the corner, not for nothing, is the old B. Altman store, to kind of give you an idea. So that's over on Fifth Avenue. Remember, Fifth Avenue started to slowly become kind of this area, at least of Fifth Avenue, started to become kind of more the retail spot. B. Altman was a huge department store. Today it's a library, very different. It's kind of sad because, department stores are going the way of the dinosaur, as they say. Who would have thought a day would come when we're all starting to feel bad for Best Buy, but this is an Amazon world, I guess. Just thought I'd point out this building. You should check it out. Kind of interesting inside. Kind of scary that one guy was able to collect all this stuff and had the money to collect all this stuff, but I guess at least he's showing it to the public. So let's be thankful for that. All right, let's keep it moving. All right, just standing here, totes cash, no big deal. Cool guy doing a video. To tell you about one of the more recent developments that has made this neighborhood even busier. This is the Queens Midtown Tunnel. It was actually finished in 1940. It was designed by a guy named Ole Singstad, who was actually the chief engineer of the Holland Tunnel, which was finished in 1927. Interesting story about the Holland Tunnel. Clifford Holland, the original chief engineer, actually died because he had a nervous breakdown 2 days before the 2 tunnels were connected. Then he died of a heart attack. Isn't that crazy? Too much stress. That's why in life, guys, you got to avoid doing anything great. Makes stress a lot easier to handle. But anyways, this was finished in 1940. The money for it actually came from FDR, who allocated money for public works, a few $1,000,000 to make this thing, and Fiorello LaGuardia helped secure it. And interestingly enough, it was under the New York City Tunnel Authority, which was one of the few authorities not controlled by Robert Moses. And it was actually done to alleviate the traffic on the East River bridges. And there's never been any traffic ever since. When are we gonna learn our lesson? More roads beget more traffic. Hello, public transit. Anywho, eventually Robert Moses did take this over in 1946. So the reason he didn't have it originally was because he wasn't the head of New York Tunnel Authority, because it was created for this tunnel, and he didn't really get along too well with FDR, go figure. But he got the last laugh. Like I said, in 1946, he became the head of the New York City Tunnel Authority. So he would have just driven over FDR's grave, but he didn't drive cars. He always had a driver driving him, even though he was a huge proponent of the road. And it was built by the Sandhogs. Remember, whenever the tunnels are built in New York City history, they're built by this group called the Sandhogs, which are the people who dig and use drills and dynamite to connect the tunnels. Pretty dangerous work, but they're a very close-knit group. So, you know, when the kids went to school, they could say, their dad's a Sandhog, huh? And then the other kids would get jealous and say, your mom's a Sandhog, huh? Anyways, pretty cool. You can see the HOV lanes, huh? You know what HOV stands for, Pat?
No.
High occupancy vehicle.
Ooh.
There's a great fact for your dates. Want to date and tell about the high occupancy vehicle. She'll really love that. I know from experience. Okay. We did it. We covered Murray Hill. Man, we went through some history, huh? We covered the Murrays. We covered Morgan and his library. We covered the fancy architecture and the historic district. We covered the Queens Midtown Tunnel. I mean, we learned a lot. A lot of stuff. Pat, did you learn something?
Oh, I learned loads.
You learned loads. You learned loads. All right, well, guys, if you enjoyed it, like I said, check out the Patreon. That's how I fund these things. Also, like and subscribe. Let's bump this thing in the algorithm, baby. Come on, let's get it up there above all the, you know, unboxing videos. All right, well, anyways, that's pretty much it. I got to get out of here. There's a helicopter here. I don't know, and honking. I don't know what's going on. It's pandemonium. All right, let's get out of here. Pat, thank you. Thank you guys for making it this far. Let's go get on the helicopter and fly into the sun. All right. Sick.